The first thing I noticed was the sound. Not crying, not footsteps, not even whispers, silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears so hard you start wondering if something inside you has gone wrong. I stood at the front of the chapel, my hands folded the way they tell you to fold them when you don't know what else to do. The polished wood of the casket reflected the soft yellow lights above it. Harold's name was engraved in gold, spelled correctly for once. He used to joke that even after 46 years of marriage, people still misspelled it. I waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The funeral director shifted his weight near the door. He avoided my eyes, the way people do when they feel guilty for something that isn't technically their fault. I turned slowly and looked behind me, row after row of empty chairs, no rustling coats, no murmured condolences, no late rivals slipping into seats, just me. I remember thinking very calmly, almost academically, so this is how a life ends. Not with applause, not with gratitude, but with absence. Harold had been a good man, not the loud kind, not the kind who demanded attention. He paid his bills early. He returned shopping carts. He held doors open even when his knees started to ache. For 38 years. He woke up at the same time every morning, brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and went to work without complaining. And now, when it mattered most, the people he had loved the hardest were nowhere to be found, our children. I checked my phone again, even though I already knew what I'd see, to unread messages from my daughter, Melissa. One missed call from my son, Daniel, time-stamped to hours earlier. No apologies, no explanations, just excuses dressed up as scheduling conflicts. Mom, I'm so sorry, but we already committed to something. It's been planned for weeks. Dad would understand. That last line sat in my chest like a stone. Harold would understand. The funeral director cleared his throat softly. Mrs. Whitaker, would you like to begin? Begin what? I wondered. You begin pretending this was normal. Begin honoring a man whose children couldn't be bothered to show up. I nodded anyway. What else was there to do? As the service started, I found myself remembering a different room, decades earlier. A hospital room with pale green walls and a crying baby placed into my arms. Melissa, then Daniel. 2 years later, red-faced and stubborn even then, Harold had stood beside me both times, terrified and proud, his hand gripping mine like he was afraid I might disappear. We did good, he whispered after Daniel was born. Didn't we? We tried, God knows we tried. We went to every school play, even the bad ones. Sat through piano recitals where nothing sounded like music. Paid for braces, summer camps, college tuition. We skipped vacations so they wouldn't have to skip opportunities. Harold worked overtime shifts he never talked about. Came home smelling like metal and sweat. Kissed my forehead and asked what was for dinner. And now his children couldn't spare an hour. The minister spoke kindly. Too kindly. Words about legacy, about love, about how Harold would live on through those he touched. I almost laughed, because if legacy was measured by who showed up, Harold's was sitting alone in the front row, clutching a folded program with shaking hands. When it was time for final prayers, the minister paused. Would any family members like to come forward? He asked. I waited again. Maybe, just maybe, someone would rush in late, breathless, apologetic, guilty enough to matter. No one came. The chairs remained empty. I stood by myself. Afterward, the funeral director approached with careful steps. We can proceed to the graveside when you're ready, he said gently. I nodded. Again, outside, The sky was painfully blue. The kind of blue Harold loved. He used to say it made him feel like everything might be all right after all. At the cemetery, there were no cars lined up behind the hearse. No procession. Just one black vehicle, one widow, and one grave. When they lowered the casket, I felt something inside me finally give way, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. It wasn't grief anymore, it was clarity. That night, after I returned to the house we had shared for 43 years, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I sat in the dark living room and listened to the refrigerator hum, the old clock tick, the house breathing without him. My phone buzzed again. A photo this time. Melissa had posted it publicly. Her, smiling, cocktail in hand, lights flashing behind her. The caption read, "Much needed night out." I stared at the screen until it went dark. That was the moment I understood something that took me 71 years to learn. You can give your children everything, your time, your body, your marriage, your youth, and still be left alone when it matters most. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the funeral wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the part where I stopped protecting them from the consequences of who they'd chosen to become. And I was done being quiet. The morning after the funeral, I woke before the alarm. For 46 years, my body had learned Harold's schedule. Even in death, it refused to let me sleep in. The other side of the bed was cold, the sheets still tucked the way I'd left them. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to its slow, uneven click, 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 click. It sounded like counting. I finally got up and made coffee for one. The mug I reached for had a small crack near the handle. Harold refused to throw it away. "Still works," he'd say, every time I suggested replacing it. I held it carefully, the way you do with things you know won't last forever. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Daniel. "Hey Mom. Sorry I missed yesterday. Things got complicated. Not I'm sorry. Not I should have been there. Just complicated." I didn't reply. By noon, Melissa called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," she said, her voice tight with something that sounded like guilt but didn't quite commit to it. "I was going to come by yesterday, but everything just spiraled. You know how these things are." I did know. I knew how parties spiraled. I knew how grief was postponed when it felt inconvenient. I knew how easy it was to assume your mother would always be there, no matter what. "I buried your father alone," I said. There was a pause. "I didn't think you'd actually start without us." I closed my eyes. "That's not how funerals work," I said quietly. She sighed. "Mom, please don't do this. We're all just trying to cope in our own way." Coping. As if absence was a coping mechanism. "I'll call you later," she said. "We should talk when things settle." The line went dead. I stood in the kitchen holding the phone long after the call ended, then set it down face first on the counter. That afternoon, I went into Harold's study. It was the one room the children never touched. Too boring, too quiet, too full of things that didn't glitter or beep. The desk was still neat. He always kept it that way. Papers stacked, pens aligned, a small wooden box tucked into the corner. I sat in his chair. It creaked under my weight. He'd meant to fix that. Never got around to it. The wooden box caught my eye again. I'd seen it 1,000 times, but never opened it. Some habits run deep. We respected each other's spaces, secrets, if there were any, stayed sealed by mutual trust. I opened it. Inside were folders. Old ones. Thick. Labeled in Harold's careful handwriting. Legal. Medical. property. My name appeared everywhere, so did theirs. I felt my chest tighten not with fear, but with understanding. Harold had known. He had known, in some quiet corner of himself, that one day I might be left to handle things alone. And he had prepared for it the only way he knew how, by making sure I wouldn't be helpless. At the bottom of the box was a letter. My name was written on the envelope. I sat there for a long time before opening it. Eleanor, if you're reading this, then I wasn't there to say it myself. I'm sorry for that. I know you. You'll try to protect the kids. You always do. But don't protect them from the truth. You are stronger than you think, and they need to learn who you really are. My hands trembled. The letter ended with a list of names, doctors, attorneys, financial advisors, and one note at the bottom, underlined twice. Do not let guilt make your decisions for you. That evening, Melissa came by unannounced. She stood in the doorway, dressed too nicely for someone supposedly grieving. Her eyes flicked around the living room, checking for changes, as if something might have shifted without her noticing. I thought you might need help, she said. I gestured to the couch. Sit. She didn't. So, she continued, Daniel and I were talking, and we think it might be best if we start helping you manage things. You know, bills, appointments, all of that. Dad used to handle a lot. Harold had handled nothing without me. But I let her talk. She stepped farther inside. We don't want you overwhelmed. At your age. There it is, I said. She stopped. At my age, I repeated calmly. She flushed. I didn't mean it like that. You did, I said. You just didn't expect me to hear it. She crossed her arms. Mom, you were alone at the funeral. That's not normal. People are going to talk. I was alone because you chose not to come. That's not fair, she snapped. You know how busy we are. I looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't cruel. She was careless. And carelessness, I was learning, cuts just as deeply. I don't need you to manage my life, I said, and I won't be making any changes right now. Her eyes narrowed. What changes? Any? She stared at me for a long moment, then smiled a thin, practiced smile I'd seen before. Usually when she wanted something. Okay, she said lightly. If that's what you want. But don't shut us out and then blame us later. After she left, I went back into the study and closed the door. I picked up the phone and dialed the first number on Harold's list. The attorney answered on the second ring. Mrs. Whitaker, he said warmly. I was hoping I'd hear from you. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since Harold died, not because the pain was gone, but because I had finally stopped pretending everything was fine, and because something inside me had shifted from waiting to be included to deciding what would happen next. The attorney's office smelled like old books and lemon polish. It was comforting, in a strange way, solid, permanent, nothing like the hollow conversations I'd been having lately. Mr. Feldman stood when I entered. He was older than Harold by a few years, his movements slow but deliberate. A man who didn't waste energy. I'm sorry for your loss, Eleanor, he said, and I believed him. Thank you, I replied. I think my husband knew this day was coming. He nodded. He was very thorough. That turned out to be an understatement. For 2 hours, we went through documents Harold had prepared quietly over the last 5 years. Updates, revisions, safeguards. He hadn't announced them. He hadn't warned anyone. He had simply done the work. As Mr. Feldman spoke, something uncomfortable settled in my stomach. Not fear. Recognition. Harold hadn't just planned for death. He'd planned for disappointment. Your husband was clear. Mr. Feldman said gently. You retain full authority over medical, financial, and residential decisions. No one can override you without your written consent. I thought of Melissa's smile, Daniel's casual text, their sudden interest in helping. And if I don't give consent, I asked, then nothing changes, he said. At all. When I left the office, my phone buzzed again, Daniel this time, Mom. Melissa said you're being difficult. We're just trying to make sure things don't get messy, that word again. As if my life were a cluttered drawer they were eager to organize. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove home and found both of them waiting in my driveway. Melissa leaned against her car, arms crossed. Daniel paced, phone pressed to his ear until he saw me pull in. He hung up quickly. Mom, he said, forcing a smile. We need to talk. We are talking, I replied, stepping past them toward the front door inside. They took their usual seats without asking. Melissa perched on the arm of the couch. Daniel sprawled out, as if asserting ownership through posture alone. So, Melissa began. We spoke to a friend who works in elder care. I said nothing, and she continued. They said it's often best to get ahead of things before they get confusing. Confusing in not grieving. Not alone. Confusing, Daniel nodded. We don't want anyone taking advantage of you. The irony was almost impressive. I met with Harold's attorney today, I said. They both straightened. You did? Melissa asked. Too quickly. Yes. Daniel cleared his throat. That's probably not necessary, Mom. We could have handled that. I know, I said. That's why I did it myself. Silence fell between us. Melissa's eyes flicked to Daniel, then back to me. Did Dad leave instructions? He did, I said. Daniel leaned forward. And he trusted me. Melissa laughed softly, a brittle sound. Mom, you're emotional right now. That's understandable. But long-term decisions should involve family. I agree, I said. Which is why I'm making them. Daniel frowned. That doesn't make sense. It does if you listen, I replied. They didn't. They never really had. Melissa stood and began pacing, just as Daniel had earlier. Okay, let's be practical. The house is big. Maintenance alone is a lot. There are options, communities, assisted living. I'm not moving, I said. She stopped. You can't decide that on your own. I already have. Daniel scoffed. Mom, this isn't about control. It never is, I said quietly. Until it is. Melissa's voice hardened. What are you saying? I'm saying, I replied, that I'm not signing anything. I'm not transferring authority, and I'm not discussing my finances. Daniel stood abruptly. You're being unreasonable. No, I said. I'm being clear. That was when Melissa said the thing she can never take back. You embarrassed us. She snapped. At the funeral, people noticed we weren't there. I felt something inside me still. Not break. Still. You embarrassed yourselves, I said. I simply showed up. Daniel threw his hands up. This is exactly what we were afraid of. Being seen? I asked. Melissa's face flushed. You're twisting this. No, I replied. I'm finally seeing it. They left angry. Not sad. Not guilty, angry. That night, I sat at the dining table with Harold's letter spread open beside me. I read it again, slower this time. Don't let guilt make your decisions for you. I picked up the phone and made one more call. The next week, Melissa tried a different approach, tears. She arrived with red eyes and a trembling voice. I'm scared, Mom, she said. I don't want to lose you. I studied her face. I was scared too, I said. Standing alone at your father's funeral. She looked down. I didn't think it mattered that much. She whispered. That, I said, is the problem. Daniel didn't call after that. Instead, I received an email from a care facility, a brochure, a suggested timeline, a note. Your children reached out on your behalf. I forwarded it to Mr. Feldman. His response was immediate. They can't do that. Good. 2 days later, Daniel showed up alone. He didn't sit. You're tearing this family apart, he said, and I met his eyes. I didn't start this, but you're finishing it, he replied. Yes, I said calmly. I am. He stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. And maybe he was. When he left, I didn't cry. I went into the garden instead. The roses were blooming again. Harold loved roses, said they reminded him that beauty and pain often grew from the same place. As I trimmed the stems, I realized something else. I had spent decades being the bridge, the buffer, the one who smoothed things over. And now that I'd stepped aside, they were finally facing the consequences of crossing too far. This wasn't revenge. It was reality. And it was only just beginning. The knock on the door came just after sunrise. Not loud. Not urgent, careful, the kind of knock people use when they're not sure they're welcome. I already knew who it was. I took my time, made coffee, let it steep longer than usual, watched the steam rise and disappear, just like so many conversations in my life had. When I finally opened the door, Melissa stood there alone, no makeup, no designer coat, just a wrinkled sweater and swollen eyes. Mom, she said quietly. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She didn't sit right away. She wandered into the living room, looking around as if she hadn't been there in years, which, emotionally, she hadn't. I went back to the cemetery, she said, by myself. I said nothing. I didn't realize, she continued, voice breaking, that there wouldn't be any flowers. No cards. No footprints in the grass except yours. I closed my eyes for a moment. He deserved better. She whispered. Yes, I said. He did. She finally sat, hands folded like a child waiting to be scolded. Daniel won't come, she said. He thinks this has gone too far. I looked at her then. Really looked. This didn't go too far, I said gently. It went exactly where it was always headed. She swallowed hard. I thought success meant never needing anyone. That's what we taught you, I replied. Not with words, with exhaustion, with silence. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I kept telling myself we'd visit Dad later, she said. That there would be time. That funerals were just symbolic. They are, I said. That's why they matter. She reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. Harold's old watch. The one he wore every day until his hands started shaking. I found this in my jewelry box, she said. I don't even remember taking it. I held it in my palm. The glass was scratched, the leather band worn thin, still ticking. I wanted to give it back, she said. To you. I closed my fingers around it. Thank you, I said. She looked up. Are you ever going to forgive us? The question hung between us, heavy. I already have, I said. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. She nodded slowly. I don't want to lose you, she whispered. Then don't try to manage me, I said. Just be my daughter. She broke then. Really broke. crying the way she hadn't as a child, or a teenager, or even when her father died. I didn't rush to fix it. I let her cry, because sometimes love looks like staying. Daniel didn't come around for months. I heard about him through mutual acquaintances, work promotions, travel photos, smiling faces cropped carefully to exclude absence. Then one afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten. That alone told me everything. Mom, I don't know how to apologize without making it about me. I thought strength meant distance. I thought showing up was optional. I was wrong. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the same box where Harold's things now lived. Some apologies don't need answers. They just need to exist. On the 1-year anniversary of Harold's death, I went back to the cemetery. This time, I wasn't alone. Melissa stood beside me, quiet, respectful. Daniel arrived late. He stayed back at first, unsure. Then he stepped forward and placed a single flower on the grave. I'm sorry, Dad, he said softly. The wind moved through the trees. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. That evening, I returned home and opened the box one last time. Not to relive the pain, but to remember the truth. That love doesn't announce itself. That sacrifice rarely looks impressive. That the people who show up quietly are often the ones holding everything together. I locked the box and slid it back into the closet. Not hidden, just complete. I am not invisible anymore. Not to my children. Not to the world, not to myself. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. A life is not measured by who applauds you. It's measured by who would have fallen apart if you hadn't been there. I was there, even when no one noticed.